Shalom, praises to Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahushua, Ba'Shem HaKadosh. Don't want to see apostles and elders, great most that rule well, and Shalom to the prophets doing the works and truth. Um, yeah, this is a interesting little article because it's kind of going over the nature of how America has been utilized post World War II. Really as a weapon. It's like a gun that's been shot. It's like a fist, slamming on a table. That's really how it's engaged with, what they call foreign policy. But it's really just, stabilizing and expanding Esau's rule, really. Post World War II, the new, the new world order after that was basically the US, having the rule. And then, up until now, all the ways you've kind of seen that play out, it just what do you call it? It's been the same playbook, the same methodology, but it's just it's been different nations, been different well, a lot of it happens might have had some of it might have happened behind closed doors, where you ain't really seeing uh even the fullness of the method until later as well. Because, South America, especially, a lot of those regimes, what they call it, regime change, was brought in. There's, most recent kind of spots it's been is Venezuela, Brazil, where you've had that influence. But with all these methodologies, it's short term, because really it's the role of America is as a force, as a weapon. So this is on unheard.com. It says what the West has forgotten the art of strategy. China and Russia are the new grandmasters. So that's obviously using chess as the analogy. It says world-class chess players know the difference between strategy and tactics better than politicians do. To win in chess, you need to start with a strategy, a long-term plan that gets you to a position of superiority. Then you close in with a sequence of tactical moves, as Max Euwe, the Dutch chess grandmaster of the 1930s, once observed. Strategy requires thought, tactics require observation. The West is all tactics. The East is mostly strategy. You need both, because even the most brilliant short-term moves do not add up to a strategy. Just look at the history of the US military interventions since World War II. Each of them have had their short-term rationale. Even Iraq, but has it made the US safer? Has it made the world safer? Has it brought democracy? Has anyone become more civilized as a result? And perfect example you can just go to is with Afghanistan, because Afghanistan's been, was in the 70s, I believe, initially a battleground, a proxy war between the Soviet Union and the US. And then more recently, the US came in there saying they're going to bring democracy. And then, now you look at it, it's the women are back in slavery over there. They're not free to do as they please, which, it shouldn't really be a surprise, because as with a lot of these conflicts, it's a kind of gets a focus for a little while, and then they achieve their gains, and then it's forgotten. Libya, man. I remember, what was it, the Arab Spring? It was what, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and now what? The kind of extension of that recently was Syria, where you had, Syria flipped for Syria was flipped for what were they called? Well, they some insurgents. Some insurgents. And then what did they, what was established down there? It's funny, you had in the news people saying like, oh, you know, Islamic fundamentalism was being re-established out there, which, is I don't know what anyone expected. So it's with their strategy, with their approach, that's just kind of the expectation. It says, Israel's strike against Iran is a classic case of a trade-off where short-term tactical maneuver is bought at the expense of a weaker strategic position in the long run. I'm not the first commentator to observe that Israel's attack against Iran will succeed tactically, possibly with sensational success, but will not stop Iran's nuclear weapons program. Any future Iranian strategic planner will logically conclude from the last series of attacks that Iran absolutely needs the bomb. Other countries in the region might too. Ukraine's biggest regret is having agreed to give up its Soviet-era nuclear weapons. Had the country kept them, Putin would never have attacked. And yeah, that's the thing is with, what's going down with these conflicts is essentially it will escalate to nuclear war, to nukes flying. That's, the lake of fire. And the key target's going to be America. But various of these different countries, it's going to be back and forth. It's going to be, that image you see of mutually assured destruction, where it has all the missiles flying from all the different corners of the globe. Because why? Why are these missiles being stockpiled? Why are they being developed? And then even with, the Middle East, a big aspect of what the state of Israel wants in the Middle East is they want only them to have access to those capabilities. But then, it's funny, like, I was going over like the YouTube channel that kind of goes through the history of how the various different countries got access to, nuclear capabilities. And then, it's because it was initially America, then the Soviet Union, then China as well, and then various other different nations. Some of them, it was through espionage. Some of them would have bought capabilities from the Soviets. From the Soviets especially. The Soviets were, I think, initially, certain regions of them sold it through, certain regions of the Soviets sold it before the collapse, but I think then after the collapse it leaked out way more easily, and it's not even clear to what extent they kind of did. It's not been laid out, because they ain't really just gonna say yeah we definitely got, and it's the same with it. It's just like having North Korea getting access to it, I believe, was Soviets, especially with their relationship. So it's you kind of had that intel leak out, and then it's prophecy, let the weak say I'm strong. All these different, North Korea. When you deal with Korea, like them man, China as well. They got invaded by Japan. Japan was like, what was it? Imperial Japan was seen as the next kind of up and comer nation, and then they were trying to basically build an empire out of all the different, sons and daughters of lot nations out there, man. And then build an empire through that. So that's why they invaded South Korea. They invaded China, and then China and South Korea weren't any kind of economic powers as you would think of them today. They hadn't developed infrastructure. They hadn't modernized. They hadn't industrialized. It was like a lot of them were rice farmers. A lot of them were broke as hell. It was only after was only after World War Two. Well, actually, no. For Japan, it was World War Two. But in both of them, it was really in the 50s plus where they kind of picked up. Because Korean War and then, Japan was dealt with by America after. But then, it's all these, things happening now. It's a long cascade effect of things that went down before. And then it's the Middle East, really, the core of it is, well, it's what's in prophecy, at least the flock will draw them out with, the Alpha Balfour Declaration, where you had the state of Israel established in the Middle East, and them being Amalek, not being who they say they are. That's one of the biggest points of contention. But then from initially it was established by the UN and the British Empire, and then after it was established by America afterwards. Once they got their independence, the alliance of America has essentially allowed them to maintain the grip as they have till now, and then them having nukes as well. And that's why the nukes are key. There's a lot of these nations. It's like I can't remember if it was Pakistan. I think India. No, I think what happened was with the India even getting nukes. I think India built the capabilities to make it, but then was different on whether to construct it. Then Pakistan did some espionage, and then constructed and tested their own. And then India had to get one in response because of the history between those two nations. So it's that's a lot of how it's a key thing. They know it's like as soon as you don't have that, you can't even deal on a certain level, because they're just like, okay. And the thing with that weapon as well, the atomic bomb. As soon as Esau got that, he dropped that shit. So everyone knows, like, oh, okay, shit. So this is what lack of strategic thinking plays an important part in the decline of the West. The biggest strategic own goal of all has been to drive China and Russia closer together, and Iran closer to both. These countries do not form an alliance in the Western sense. What they have in common is an overriding strategic goal to become independent of Western coercion. Our sanctions, our bans, our wars, and proxy wars have had the opposite effect of what we intended. Some, like the sanctions, failed tactically. Russia has outgrown the West and has shifted to a war economy that the Europeans struggle to keep up with. And yeah, it's impacted the relationship with Europe, because one, like America, has been, well, it's the NATO alliance has been fraying. So a lot of the European countries have basically then been like, okay, we'll go back to building up our military. We ain't gonna deal with America. And then as well, their relationships with Russia, for certain, energy is the big one, and that kind of being killed by the sanctions then impacts various things in the economy. And then as well, it's these wars of just globally destroyed the economy of everyone. Everyone's fucked. And then Trump's coming as well and slam the tariffs down. And then those tariffs are just gonna make life peak in America, make life peak everywhere else as well, because all these things impact on a global scale. So it says, but the most consequential failure of the policy was strategic. The financial sanctions persuaded China and Russia to develop a joint payment system. Until a few years ago, the world of finance depended on the US dollar and Western-controlled global payments infrastructure. Part of the infrastructure was SWIFT, a Brussels-based quango that provides the main networks through which international banks communicate. When Russia invaded Ukraine, one of the first actions taken by Western governments was to cut off some Russian banks from SWIFT. I remember seeing, people trying to pay with cards, and it was like Russian nationals that would peak if they had, a Russian card. They would have to switch up to, to the UK cards to have, a means of kind of, utilizing funds. So as I say, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Russia banned SWIFT so they can no longer transact. The West also froze Russian financial assets, a large chunk of which is held in vaults in Belgium. Russia is essentially cancelled by the global financial markets. The result is that Russia, China, and other countries have been developing their own parallel financial infrastructure. And then, the BRICS. And then even with food as well, Brazil's been, China's already been stockpiling from before, but then they're moving to, to Brazil for certain. I think soybeans is the first thing, but there's a few other things that the US sanctions will push them further away from as well. So it was the first part is called BRICS. BRICS stand to Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The name BRICS came up 25 years ago as a short form to denote the 5 newly developing economies most likely to succeed. The group has now grown to 10 countries and that includes India, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, and Iran. They're not like NATO or the EU. India is a bit of an odd one out here. What they have in common is a desire to be independent of Western infrastructure monopolies. And that's even more so. Let the weak say I'm strong, and be thou God unto them as well, because it's basically providing the arena for them all to link up. So it says payment systems are to financial capitalism what plumbing is to the water supply. Not something we talk about until we have a problem with it. The Western payment monopoly makes it possible for the US and Europe to impose financial sanctions in the first place. But financial sanctions are like the cake you can either have or eat. When you start abusing your monopoly powers and impose sanctions on too many countries, you give an incentive to break out of the system. Yeah. And that's the thing is even more so, underneath Trump, because in Trump's first time, what did he do? He, the trade war with China, and that also linked up the relationships with China and Russia more, and had them develop further, and then he pulled out of the. It's funny they're like doing the new nuclear deal, pulled out of the nuclear deal that Albizi set up with Iran, and re-established sanctions, and then that forced them to essentially have to integrate with Russia. But then it's all prophecy. It's all prophecy, man. This guy, DJ Trump, who's got in, he's the way he's essentially been bulldozing through his term so far. That's all prophecy. This is what BRICS was developed by scientists from St. Petersburg State University. It works differently from Western payment systems. BRICS is decentralized, it has no hub, no owner, is based on the same underlying technology as cryptocurrencies, the blockchain. BRICS is sanctions proof, no member can sanction any other member. If you want to make yourself independent from the US, start with a payment system. It's the smart thing to do. Yeah, and that as well just speaks to how, they're why they're looking to push forward to, the MOTB, because that then there will be outside everything will be in the bounds of the system, and they'll be tied to you, biologically. Funny as hell. Okay. Yeah, there's a bit more there, but we just kind of mainly got the point. It's you know, gone over how the US kind of utilize their power, but then, the long term effects don't quite have the same effect. But then that's with the US, it is something that is made as a short term tool. It's a bludgeon, it's a weapon to kind of beat down and enact certain things, to push certain things out. Even the culture and whatnot, as it pushes it out, it blasts it out, it just drowns out everything else. But then even that's kind of waning, because you have like it's Korea. It's funny, like South Korea, tiny as fuck country, but then you have like K-dramas, K-pop movies. You had, what was it, Parasite, and then even Parasite spoke to the Western dynamic of how things go down as well. People watching it was like, oh yeah, the financial disparities they have, which in South Korea they exist. It had them even as much so over here. So Joel 3 and 12, it says, let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Yehoshaphat or Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in a sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord Yahweh is in the valley of decision. So yeah, the valley of decision. Multitudes going to be drawn in. And then, it's for the harvest. It's for the harvest, man. It's for people to get, judgments to be played out. And that's why all these situations are developing. Because why? It's going to culminate in that big, festival of destruction. And all these different nations, that the Lord Jehovah Hashem has a bone to pick with, then they're going to receive, that bone's going to be picked. They're going to have to get down. This is what Isaiah 34 and 2, for the indignation of the Lord Jehovah is upon all nations, and his fury upon all their armies. He hath utterly destroyed them, he hath delivered them to the slaughter. Their slain also shall be cast out, and their stink shall come up out of their carcasses, and the mountains shall be melted with their blood. And all the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heaven shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their hosts shall fall down, as a leaf falleth from the vine, and as a falling fig from the fig tree. So yeah, the heavens will roll together, shall be rolled together as a scroll. That's that nuclear bomb and that mushroom cloud. Because why? Despite all the capabilities, you're trying to contend with the judgment coming through. Spirit's going to be put on all these different nations, where they'll bring about that destruction of Babylon the Great, which is America, and that lake of fire, for the sake of prophecy. That's where you have, the breakdown between, the US and its allies, and really, the hubris, the pride of Esau, Edom, being recorded is it's beautiful. DJ Trump is really the guy to kind of express all of that, and then really highlight Esau's true spirit, which he's out here pretending he's the good, he's the righteous, he's the just, but then there's no good, no righteousness, no justice being found out here. So it's evident he's a liar. He's been found to be a liar. So this is what okay. My sword shall be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Idumea, and upon the people of my curse to judgment. Yeah. The sword of the Lord Jehovah is filled with blood, is made fat with fatness, and with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For the Lord Jehovah hath a sacrifice in Bosra, and a great slaughter in the land of Idumea. So yeah, Idumea, Edom, man. That land is It's curse is set. But then, prophecy needs to be fulfilled that Mark's gonna go out. And then Esau's gonna, think he's about to fill his belly, he's gonna accomplish his desires. But then, script's gonna be flipped. Because as far as it's having been in this man's society, in this man's realm, how is this meant to last and continue? This guy's talking about, being a Mars in 10, 15, 20 X years, colonizing X, Y, Z out in space. But, we can't even deal on the Earth. But then, he must needs be taken out of the way. That's really what's going to be fulfilled. But yeah, Jeremiah 49:20 says, "Therefore hear the counsel of the Lord Yahweh that you've taken against Edom, and his purposes that you've purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely you shall make their habitation desolate with them." And yeah, the least of the flock will draw them out, man. That's the core of what everyone's being drawn into, man. These guys were, so-called defending themselves, small hats. But then, what went down, that was like 2 years ago now. And they used the day as like, the origin of what popped this off. But then why is it, Lebanon's getting hit? Syria's getting smoked. Iran's getting hit. When it was, about Gaza. Man accomplished what they wanted to accomplish in Gaza. But then afterwards, what? It didn't stop. Because why? It's this playing that role, fulfilling, their purpose, man. And drawing everyone in, man. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Sure.